in health care, copying and printing, custodial services, all these available in the Yellow Pages. We have saved tens of millions of dollars for taxpayers by contracting for them with Hoosiers. And this has been one of the ways we balanced the budget, which we found, of course, in condition of total bankruptcy. Couldn't have done it without these reforms. So it leads to the question, why would you be so ideologically committed to big government that you would overcharge taxpayers just for the sake of having larger government? I don't understand that viewpoint. We prefer to take a much more practical approach. Incidentally, we also found a state government sending 38 cents of every dollar out of state. I don't know why. I don't think it was intentional. I think people simply weren't keeping track. We do. We've pushed it up to 86%. That means billions of dollars staying in Hoosier firms. Lastly, we do this to protect taxpayers, but if a side effect is that the private sector, which pays the bills for government, gets a little bigger, and Indiana state government gets a little smaller, that's just fine with me, and I don't understand those who would disagree.
Ms. Long-Thompson, 45-second rebuttal.
Well, a major problem with privatization, and particularly the privatization contracts that Governor Daniels has gotten the state into, is that it is a short-term gain for long-term pain. In other words, we get some money up front, but in the long term it's going to cost us. The toll road is a classic example because not only have the tolls now more than doubled on the toll road, but the foreign consortium that has control of the toll road will have their investment recouped in 15 to 20 years. That means for 55 to 60 years, money that should be coming into Indiana for our infrastructure will be going outside, not just Indiana, but outside the United States. And that's why I have said as governor, I am going to look at every privatization contract he's entered us into and take us in the right direction.
Thank you. Mr. Horning? Please, we're cutting into the candidate's time to respond to questions. Mr. Horning, your rebuttal?
It's not much of a rebuttal. It's just more of an assertion that, once again, where we see politicians saying they know best, what they're doing is saying that all of the people out in the private sector do not. And I just don't believe that. I believe that the expertise in America that built this nation before we had anything like income tax or the first federal program is still out there. I think we still have the engineers and doctors to do what's necessary. And all we need to do is just decide, are we going to be a nation where we have a focused government that's there to protect us, or are we going to ask for a government that has done something that's never worked very well, and that is to provide all the services that used to be done by Kiwanis and churches and voluntary associations and businessmen? I say turn it over. I say do the things the government has to do and do it in a very responsible fashion and turn everything over to the experts.
Thank you. Our third question, and we're going to begin with you, Mr. Horning. It comes from Dave Coriati. He's a retired business owner from Indianapolis. He asks, how do you propose to reverse the steady departure of manufacturing jobs from the state?
Well, this is something that actually hits me personally. My medical sector is one where taxation, regulation, litigation forced most of the businesses overseas. Now, that's not the case with everything. Electronics used to be a big deal in Indiana, and we've lost a lot of those, not necessarily to foreign countries where they have less regulation and obviously less litigation, but we've actually lost a lot of those to other Rust Belt states. The thing that we've done more than anything else is to allow politicians to decide what's best for us. And that's to choose things like professional sports and gambling, as opposed to, allowing people to keep their money and make their own decisions. I think that it's frustrating that a nation that was built, in fact, let's just look at Indiana. We had Duesenberg, Studebaker. We had huge electronics companies that have been leaving by the boatload. And the problem has been that we've been waving them goodbye instead of begging them to stay. We've been asking all other sorts of businesses to come here, foreign auto manufacturers, and we pay them very handsomely for each of the jobs that they say they'll bring. But it's not working. It is just not working. This phony nonsense that politicians actually create jobs has got to be dispelled. You guys create jobs. People create jobs. Businessmen create jobs. Politicians get in the way, and I'm about getting them out of the way.
Mr. Daniels?
Well, there's much to agree with in what Andrew just said. I've said it 1,000 times myself. Government does not create jobs. Men and women of enterprise do, and government at its best creates the conditions whereby they do that well, make wealth for each other. So we've reformed the tax laws of this state, lowered taxes on businesses that export from here, lowered taxes on R&D, notably lowered property taxes, reformed regulation, our litigation system, and that's why we have the lowest unemployment in the Midwest. That's why we've set records for job attraction 4 consecutive years. That's why we are rated now over and over again by everyone who looks at this as the most attractive state basically outside the Sun Belt. Now that job's not even close to being done yet. And we must work every day to build the kind of climate of opportunity where the investment that Andrew just talked about will naturally happen. He's quite correct. You know, we compete for incentives, and we've had a very successful record of winning jobs that are looking at more than one state. But that's the last piece of the puzzle, and the most important thing we do always, and we've been doing it successfully, is make of Indiana a magnet for new jobs and investment. You know, government bailouts are a bad idea, and if government tries, as some of our neighboring states have, desperately to protect jobs that are no longer competitive, it makes a big mistake, punishes taxpayers, and forfeits its opportunity to do what really matters, and that's what Indiana is doing in a superior fashion, creating a climate of opportunity. That's the right way to do it for the long term.
Ms. Long-Thompson, the loss of manufacturing jobs.
Well, again, Governor Daniels is misrepresenting what is really happening here in Indiana. And as I stated earlier, we've lost over 60,000 jobs here in Indiana just since last year. And I think probably the problem with his approach to economic development is it doesn't really create an economic climate that sets us apart from other states. And that's the kind of policy we need. That's why I am proposing 2 things. First, as governor, if I'm honored to serve as governor, I will be a leader on, among governors on ensuring that any future trade agreements work for us. I know what it's like when a family member loses a job because it gets shipped overseas, and I'm very proud that when I served in Congress, I voted against NAFTA. But we also have to make sure not just that taxes are kept low here, and he talks about lower taxes, but in fact, he has repeatedly raised taxes, sales tax, the cigarette tax, property tax is $1 billion. My record on taxes is very clear. As a member of Congress, I never once voted to raise any tax. I voted against any piece of legislation that had a new tax or a tax increase in it. My approach to economic growth is one that will create this economic climate that sets us apart from our neighboring states and from other places across the country, but also take advantage of the workforce that we have here that is so well experienced in manufacturing. And when we do that, we will have job growth in Indiana.
Mr. Horning, 45-second rebuttal.
Well, I guess I got it kind of easy here. They have to convince you that they know best about what to do with jobs, and I have to convince you that they don't. But other than just the things that I had already said about politicians and entrusting them with this burden, it is a burden for them as well as it is for any of us to decide what's best for us in terms of engineering versus service businesses. I think they've made some bad choices. But I really want to emphasize that I don't think any of us up here have any business making decisions about business when that is not our business. The business of government is a very simple thing in my way of looking at it, and that is just to protect whatever it is that you have by way of rights and property and life from those who would take it away from you. That's really it. I don't want to do anything else, and so I don't need to convince you of my expertise.
Thank you. Mr. Daniels? Yes.
Is this the rebuttal I didn't get on the previous question, Dan?
Yeah.
I might be mistaken, but I think I missed a turn. Is that possible?
If I missed that, Governor, I apologize. Okay.
Am I right? Okay. Let me just use that if I'm correct about that. Ms. Thompson, so many falsehoods, so little time. Let me just start.
Governor, if I could interrupt for just a second, my earphone tells me that you are correct, and I did cheat you out of a rebuttal. We're going to give you some extra time here. Go ahead.
I'll try to stay within it. No, we balanced the budget of the state without raising taxes. The tightest budget in 55 years. This is a matter, there's no debate about this. It's absolutely true.